There was a moment, so small you almost missed it, when the night air felt softer against your skin, as if it was trying to tell you something quietly. Maybe you remember it now. That strange, comforting sense that you were being gently guided somewhere, even though your body was standing still. It's often like that on the edge of sleep. You don't walk forward so much as drift, as if the world rearranges itself to make a path for you. That's how you found yourself arriving in that hidden valley, not with fanfare, not with purpose, but with the slow ease of someone being carried by a feeling. A lantern glowed at your side. You don't remember picking it up, yet somehow its warmth matched the rhythm of your breath, as though it had been yours for a long time. Each step down the quiet slope gave off the faint crunch of old earth settling under your weight, and even that sound felt unhurried, softened by distance and gentle night air. You might be wondering how you reached such a place at all, a valley where the hills curled inward protectively, as if the land itself wanted to hold you for a while. But some journeys don't start with decisions. They begin with exhaustion, or longing, or the tender hope that maybe there's a quieter way to exist than the one you've been carrying all day, and maybe that's why the lantern stayed ahead of you by just a few steps. It didn't pull, it simply glowed patiently, a reminder that you didn't need to rush, that nothing in this valley would demand anything of you. There was a river there too, barely a thread of silver, whispering through reeds tall enough to brush your fingertips as you passed. It didn't speak in words, but you felt its calm anyway, as if something inside you recognized the rhythm. Maybe it mirrored something in you, a softer pulse beneath all the noise, waiting to be heard again. As the path widened, the valley opened like a slow inhale. You felt the shift, the way the air cooled just enough to soothe your skin, how the lantern's glow felt warmer by contrast, and for the first time in a long while, your thoughts drifted not outward, but inward, toward a place that felt almost ancient, almost familiar. There, at the valley's center, stood a weathered archway made of stone. Moss curled along its cracks like gentle handwriting, and there was something undeniably kind about the way it leaned, imperfect and welcoming. As you stepped beneath it, the lantern brightened slightly, its flame lifting as if acknowledging your arrival. It was strange, wasn't it? That the moment you crossed through, all the things that had been buzzing inside your mind earlier, the restless thoughts, the worries, the pieces of your day that clung stubbornly, they didn't disappear exactly. They just loosened their grip, the way tired fingers slowly release what they no longer have the strength to hold. And maybe that's when you felt it, that soft certainty that you were meant to be here, that somewhere in this valley, hidden in the quiet folds of night, the ancient scroll of calm was waiting for you, patient, unassuming, as if it had been expecting you for ages. There's a certain kind of quiet that feels almost alive, the kind that doesn't ask you to hush, but simply invites you to notice the softer edges of things. That was the quiet waiting for you as you stepped deeper into the valley, the kind that seems to gather behind you like a gentle cloak, muffling whatever weight you arrived with, and then, in that mellow hush, you saw them. At first you thought it was just another shape, carved by shadow and lantern light. A tall figure sitting near the old pathway, wrapped in folds of pale fabric that moved like slow breath, but then the lantern flickered, and you realized the figure was watching you. Not intensely, not in the way that makes you feel examined, but the way someone watches a candle being lit, softly, kindly, with a subtle, quiet curiosity. They didn't speak at first, they didn't need to. Their presence alone seemed to calm the air around you. Even the night wind gentled itself, drifting more softly through the leaves, as if out of respect. You couldn't name their age. Everything about them looked both ancient and ageless. Their hair fell loosely over their shoulders, streaked with the silvery glow of lantern light. Their eyes carried that rare kind of stillness you only see in people who have long since stopped running from their own mind. When they finally moved, it wasn't to stand or gesture or beckon. They simply tilted their head a little to the side, acknowledging your presence the way someone might greet a shy animal, without pressure, without demand, just a quiet, steady warmth, and somehow you responded without thinking. Your shoulders softened, your breath deepened, the restless little tremors inside your chest eased, as if the keeper's calmness was contagious. You wondered, not aloud, just in the privacy of your own drifting thoughts, whether they had always been here, waiting for you specifically. The keeper's gaze held a kind of recognition, as if they'd known you were coming long before you did, as if they'd felt the trembling in your thoughts across a distance and lit a small inner lantern of their own, preparing to meet you. When they finally stood, their movements were slow enough that you could feel the air shift around them. They placed a hand lightly over their heart and then pointed toward the winding path ahead, the one that dipped slightly into darkness before rising again toward a soft glow. No words, no instructions, just a gesture that felt both simple and deeply meaningful. They began walking and you followed, not out of obligation, but because something about them made you want to. Their steps were unhurried, each one landing like a gentle sigh. You realized, after a while, that the keeper didn't seek silence. They were silence, embodied, and being near them made your own thoughts feel less sharp, less frantic. You almost whispered to them, a question you weren't sure how to phrase. Something like, "Why me?" or "How did you know I needed this?" But before the words could form fully, the keeper paused, turned slightly toward you, and gave a small, knowing smile. A quiet smile that said, "You're not here to be judged. You're here to rest. You didn't need to ask anything after that." At the end of the path, the keeper stopped in front of an ancient wooden door framed in stone. They placed a hand against it, and the wood responded with a faint, warm glow. You felt the hum of it beneath your feet, an old, steady pulse like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The keeper looked at you one more time, eyes soft, patient, endlessly calm. Their expression seemed to say, "This is where your quiet begins." And with a slow, gentle nod, they opened the door to the chamber where the ancient scroll rested. The door opened with the slow wooden sigh of something that had been waiting a very long time. Not impatiently, but with the kind of patience that comes from knowing its moment will arrive eventually. And as you stepped through, the air shifted around you, warmer than you expected, almost tender in the way it wrapped itself along your arms. For a moment, you didn't move. You just took in the room. It wasn't grand or imposing, nothing like the chambers you see in old stories. It felt lived in, a little uneven, a little forgotten around the edges, like an attic or an old library no one visits unless they truly need to. The walls curved inward slightly, rough stone smoothed by age, carrying faint marks you couldn't fully decipher, scratches, old drawings, places where hands had paused centuries before yours. But what you noticed first was the dust, not the kind that feels neglected or abandoned. This dust floated gently in the air like soft fragments of old memories, suspended in a slow, dreamlike dance. The lantern's glow caught them one by one, turning each tiny speck into a drifting ember, a brief point of light before it settled back into the quiet. It felt strangely like walking through someone's breath. Every step stirred the dust just a little, lifting it into soft spirals that rose and fell like sighs. And maybe it was that motion, that subtle give and take of stillness and movement, that made you feel something stirring inside yourself too, something you hadn't touched in a while. A quieter, slower pulse beneath the usual noise. The keeper stayed near the door, their presence lingering like a calm shadow. They didn't follow you deeper into the room. They knew somehow that this space was meant to meet you alone. so they simply placed the lantern onto a small stone ledge, letting its glow widen gently across the chamber until even the shadows softened. And there, at the center of the room, you saw it, a table carved from a single piece of pale, almost bone-like wood, its surface uneven and lovely, shaped not by tools but by time. And resting upon it, wrapped in layers of faded cloth, was the ancient scroll. You approached slowly, not out of fear but reverence. Something in your chest tightened, but in a gentle way, like when you recognize a long-lost melody. You weren't sure why, but it felt as though the room knew you, as if the dust had waited for your particular footsteps, your particular silence. You reached out a hand, hovering just above the scroll, but not yet touching it. And that's when you noticed the sound. At first, you thought it was your own heartbeat, echoing strangely off the stone walls. But no, it was softer than that. A low, rhythmic hum, like a whisper hidden beneath the air. The kind of sound you don't hear with your ears so much as feel inside your ribs. It vibrated lightly against your fingertips, humming in time with your breath. The room breathed with you. Inhale, a faint lifting of the dust, rising like tiny constellations. Exhale, the slow settling of motes around your hands and shoulders, as if the space itself were soothing you, letting you know it was safe to rest here. You felt something loosen inside, a knot you didn't realize you'd been holding, perhaps because in this room nothing hurried, nothing expected anything of you. The dust didn't judge the tremble in your breath, the unevenness of your thoughts. It simply floated, drifted, settled, showing you the quiet cycle you'd forgotten to notice in yourself. And as the hum deepened, guiding your breathing into a calmer rhythm, you felt the room tell you, without words, that you were ready. Ready to touch the scroll, ready to unroll its first gentle glyphs. There's a particular kind of hush that falls just before you touch something meaningful. A hush that isn't about silence at all but about presence. That's what gathered around you as your fingers brushed the edge of the faded cloth. The air seemed to lean in, the dust settling almost reverently, as though even the room understood the significance of this moment. The scroll felt warm beneath your hands, not the warmth of heat, but the warmth of something long held, long treasured, as though the memories of every person who had ever opened it lingered softly in the fibers. The fabric gave slightly under. Your fingertips, worn smooth by centuries of gentle unwrapping, you could sense the age of it, not brittle but wise. With a slow breath, you loosened the first layer of cloth. The sound it made was delicate, that faint, whispery scrape of fabric against fabric, like pages turning in a dream. You folded it back, and beneath it lay another layer, even older, the threads thin but sturdy. Each movement revealed a little more of the hidden shape, each unwrapping feeling like the soft revelation of a secret being shared willingly, without urgency. The keeper, still at the doorway, didn't move. They simply watched with the steady patience of someone who had witnessed this ritual countless times. Their presence kept the room grounded, allowing you to let your guard fall a little more with each breath. When the final layer loosened, the scroll rested bare before you. Its surface wasn't smooth like parchment. It had a gentle texture, almost like pressed leaves or the skin of a well-worn instrument, something that had been touched, held, trusted. You slid your fingers along its edge and felt the faint ridges where time had left its marks. A small crease here, a softened corner there, the tiniest indentation where someone long ago must have pressed too tightly. You unrolled it slowly, letting the scroll open itself in its own pace. The first glyphs appeared. They weren't sharp or rigid. They curved and dipped like streams in soft earth, lines that seemed to breathe on the page. The lantern's glow made their edges shimmer faintly, as if the ink held the remnants of old moonlight. You leaned closer, and the glyphs almost seemed to tilt toward you in return. An invitation, a whisper, a subtle promise. You didn't know what they meant, not in any literal sense, But meaning isn't always tied to language. Sometimes your body understands before your mind does. And as your eyes followed the gentle curves, something shifted inside you. A recognition, maybe, or a memory of calm you hadn't felt in a long time. One glyph in particular caught your attention. It spiraled inward, narrowing into a soft point at its center. The moment you noticed it, your breath slowed, matching the rhythm of its shape. You traced it lightly with your fingertip, and the texture changed under your touch. Smoother, cooler, as if the scroll acknowledged you. A faint warmth traveled up your arm. It wasn't startling or intense. It was the kind of warmth you feel when someone places a comforting hand on your back, steady, grounding. For a moment, your thoughts softened around the edges, your mind unclenching just a little more. You realized then that the scroll didn't need to explain itself. It wasn't here to teach you through instruction, but through feeling, through the quiet, steady rhythm of symbols that seemed to mirror your own inner landscape, the tangled paths, the looping thoughts, the pauses you didn't know how to make during the day. As you unrolled more of the parchment, the glyphs drifted gracefully across the page, their lines widening and narrowing like gentle breaths. Some bent toward each other, as if in conversation. Others leaned away, giving space. It felt somehow like watching the choreography of your own mind, its worries, its hopes, its unspoken softness, but translated into a language made of curves instead of noise. You felt your shoulders sink a little, your jaw unclench. The weight you carried lift just a fraction. The scroll was opening you as much as you were opening it. There's a moment when you're reading something ancient and quiet, where the words, or in this case the glyphs, stop being the main thing. They're still there, still beautiful, still steady on the parchment, but your attention starts slipping into the spaces between them. Almost like how sometimes you stop listening to the melody of a song and begin hearing the soft breaths the singer takes in between the notes. That's what happened to you. It began subtly, a pause in your breath that didn't feel like a pause at all, more like a gentle drifting. Your eyes rested on a line of symbols, but the meaning you felt didn't come from their shapes. It came from the stillness surrounding them, that soft halo of untouched parchment holding more depth than any ink could. You leaned closer without realizing it, as though the silence itself had something to tell you. It didn't feel empty, not like a void or a blank space. It felt inhabited, alive. A warm quiet that carried its own kind of message. You know that feeling when someone sits beside you without speaking, and somehow their presence says everything? The scroll felt like that. Like a companion who didn't need explanations or details to understand where your thoughts had been wandering all day. Your fingertips brushed the parchment again, this time hovering not over the glyphs, but over the pale spaces between them, and the air seemed to shift just slightly, as if leaning forward to meet you. That low hum you'd felt earlier deepened, weaving itself around your wrist like a small, steady current, not pulling you toward the ink, but toward the quiet. You almost laughed under your breath, a soft, private sound, because it was strange how comforting it felt to read nothing. To let your eyes rest in places where there were no symbols guiding you, no meaning to decipher, no expectations of understanding. The blankness offered a kind of freedom, a place where your mind didn't have to solve anything. Have you ever noticed how much of your day is filled with filling space with thoughts, filling silence with noise, filling pauses with explanations, filling moments with tasks? The scroll seemed to know that about you, as if it had been waiting to show you the simple truth that you don't always have to fill everything. You can let things be, incomplete. You can let moments breathe. You can rest in the spaces where nothing is demanded of you. As you lingered there, your thumb resting on the margin of the parchment, you sensed something, not a voice, not a message, but a sensation, like a whisper made of warmth. It drifted through your chest, easing the tightness you carry there on heavy days. a whisper that didn't use words, yet you understood it anyway. You don't have to chase calm. It will meet you in the quiet. The keeper hadn't moved, but you felt their gaze soften, as if they could tell you'd found your way into one of the scroll's deepest teachings, not through translation, not through study, but through stillness. You let the whisper fill you, not loudly, but softly, like a slow inhale that settles into the deepest part of your lungs. And in that moment, between the lines, you understood something important. Calm isn't always in the symbols of your life. Sometimes it's hiding in the spaces you overlook. If the scroll had stopped there, if it had offered only gentle glyphs and quiet spaces, you might have thought its wisdom was meant only for peace. But ancient things rarely shy away from truth, and neither did this one. As you unrolled it a little farther, something shifted, not suddenly, not sharply, but with the steady honesty of a sky beginning to change. The parchment grew slightly darker toward the next section, the ink deepening into slow, swirling forms. They weren't chaotic, just honest, like clouds gathering with purpose, not to frighten, but to reveal. You felt your breath catch in your chest, not from fear, but from recognition. A soft, quiet "oh, this part is about me, isn't it?" The glyphs here curved differently, not smooth as before, but layered, textured, patterned like ripples crossing each other in a restless pond. They reminded you of thoughts you try not to linger on, the kind that come in sudden rushes during the day, or slip beneath the cracks at night, whispering in a language your body understands, even when your mind wants to look away. You touched one of the darker strokes, and the scroll pulsed, gently, not enough to startle you, more like a hand meeting yours halfway. And then, without warning, you felt it, a soft breeze brushing across your cheek. Not real wind, not from the room. This was something internal, the way it feels when a worry first stirs inside you, fluttering before it forms. It passed through you like the beginning of weather, subtle at first. Then, as you traced another line, a warmer current swelled up from your chest, rising like a small storm cloud eager to be recognized. The scroll wasn't showing you calm. It was showing you yourself. You closed your eyes for a moment. It was safer that way, not to hide, but to listen more clearly. And in that darkness behind your eyelids, you saw flashes of familiar things, moments when your thoughts had tangled into knots. Days when your chest had tightened for reasons you couldn't name, nights when the slightest worry had grown louder, simply because the world around you had gone quiet. But the scroll didn't amplify these memories. It softened them. You opened your eyes, and the ink patterns looked different now, not stormy, cyclical, like gentle rainfall moving across a landscape, like wind teasing tall grass, like the ebb and flow of waves that never intend harm. They're simply being what they are, and slowly you began to understand. Your inner weather had never been a flaw, never a failure, never a sign that something was wrong with you. It was part of your rhythm, just as the valley has seasons, just as the dust in this room rises and falls, just as breath itself gathers and releases. The scroll invited you to step into your own inner atmosphere, not to fix it, not to brace against it, but to walk through it the way you would walk through mist, letting it cling lightly to your skin, knowing it will shift again when it's ready. A faint chill brushed your arm, followed by a soft warmth rising up your spine. You felt tension move through you the way clouds move across a sky, slowly, naturally, without the world ending. And when a tiny, familiar knot of anxiety pulsed near your throat, the scroll responded with a gentle glow beneath your palms, almost as if saying, "Yes, this too belongs. Let it be seen." The keeper watched from the doorway, their stillness steady as ever. And for a moment you wondered if they'd once opened this same part, if they had their own inner storms, their own shifting skies. Their eyes met yours, and the faintest hint of a knowing smile curved at the corner of their mouth. A smile that whispered, "You're doing exactly what you're meant to." The scroll's weather didn't frighten you now. It felt natural, honest, almost beautiful. And as you continued tracing the darker glyphs, you felt something unexpected, a sense of companionship, as if the storms inside you were not enemies, but old friends who had simply never been heard with this kind of gentleness before. There's a moment, you may have felt it before, when a long-held worry suddenly feels lighter, not because it disappears, but because something inside you finally stops clutching it so tightly. That's the feeling that met you as you unrolled the next section of the scroll. A gentle loosening, a warmth spreading in, quiet increments, as if the parchment itself exhaled and invited you to do the same. The glyphs in this part were different again. Not bright like the first ones, not swirling like the weathered patterns you'd just passed through. These symbols looked almost faded, not from age, but from softness. Their lines were pale, tender, as though they'd been written with a brush dipped in warm breath instead of ink. You traced one with your fingertip and felt nothing dramatic, just a mellow, heat blooming slowly beneath your skin, the kind that uncoils tension without making a sound. You didn't realize how much weight you had been carrying until the scroll began to lift it. It didn't pry anything from you. It didn't ask you to name the heaviness, or explain it, or justify it. It simply allowed space for it, and in that permission you felt something inside your chest crack open, small, quiet cracks, like thawing ice beneath the first touch of spring. Your breath slipped, out in a slow sigh you hadn't meant to release. It felt like dropping something you didn't know you were holding. The lantern's glow softened too, warming from gold into a deeper amber that pooled across the parchment. In that glow, the faded glyphs seemed to shift, shaping themselves into textures rather than symbols, gentle hills, curled leaves, the impression of soft fabric draped across a quiet afternoon, shapes you couldn't decode but could feel, like memories that existed more in your body than in your mind. You leaned closer, resting your forearms on the table, letting your posture soften without thinking. The room seemed to respond, as if the dust itself paused mid-air to honor this small act of surrender. And for the first time in a long while, you felt the kind of relief that doesn't rush in. It seeps, slow, steady, like warmth soaking into cold fingers. The scroll reminded you, again without words, that heaviness doesn't always leave in the way you expect. It doesn't have to be fought, or fixed, or forcibly released. It can dissolve the way fog dissolves at sunrise, quietly, gradually, in its own time. As you traced the faded shapes, you felt memories drift into your awareness, not painful ones, just moments where you'd felt weighed down without knowing why, times you'd held tension in your shoulders, carried tightness in your breath, pretended you were fine because the world around you kept moving too fast. But instead of tightening around those memories, your body softened. You saw them from a place of distance, as if the scroll held you just far enough away to observe without reopening old wounds. And in that distance, those moments looked different, less like failures, more like small, honest signals that you were human, feeling, trying. Something inside you eased at that realization. A subtle warmth rose in your chest, spreading through your ribs like a low ember glowing steadily, patiently. The kind of warmth that stays, the kind you don't need to cling to because it isn't going anywhere. It felt like the scroll was handing you a truth you'd forgotten. There is calm, hidden in places you've already lived. Quiet waiting inside moments you barely noticed. Softness tucked beneath days that felt heavy. You hadn't lost it. You had simply forgotten how to return to it. And now, sitting in this dim, ancient room, with the keeper's stillness resting like a blessing behind you, and the scroll's faded glyphs breathing softly beneath your hands, You felt that calm begin to settle into you again, not as a dramatic release, but as a gentle dissolving, a melting of tension, a slackening of effort, a quiet unburdening, like snow softening under a rising sun, like a knot loosening on its own, like your body remembering its natural shape. There's a particular silence that arrives only after something deep inside you has been understood, not solved, not conquered, just seen. That was the silence resting in the room now. A soft, velvety hush that wrapped around you like a shawl, warm and steady, as though the air itself was proud of you for coming this far. You hadn't noticed when your breathing changed, when it became slower, gentler, almost sleepy, but the scroll had. Its faded glyphs gleamed faintly under the lantern's amber light, as if acknowledging the shift in you. You didn't feel the need to keep reading, not because you were finished, but because something inside you whispered that you had received what you came for. The keeper must have sensed it too. They stepped closer, their movements still slow enough to feel like part of the room's natural rhythm. They didn't speak. They simply placed a hand on the table, palm down, not touching the scroll, but close enough that a soft ripple of warmth spread across the parchment. An old, gentle gesture. The kind made by someone who respects endings as much as beginnings. You looked down at the scroll one last time. The glyphs no longer felt like mysteries or lessons. They felt like companions, familiar shapes that mirrored quiet parts of yourself you had forgotten to visit. The darker, swirling strokes looked softer now. The pale symbols felt closer, almost tender, and you realized something almost shyly beautiful. You didn't need to hold on to the scroll's teachings to keep them. They had already found their place in you. You placed your fingertips at the edge of the parchment. It resisted slightly, as ancient things often do, not wanting to rush the moment. So you waited just for a breath, until the scroll seemed ready to return to itself. Then gently, you began rolling it back up. The parchment curled inward with a soft sound, like old leaves folding back into the earth. Each slow rotation felt like sealing a memory, like tucking away a piece of calm you could carry without effort. With the final curl, the scroll rested once again in its old, familiar shape. You wrapped the cloth around it, one layer then the next, feeling the subtle warmth lingering beneath the fabric. It wasn't just the scroll's warmth anymore. It was yours too. Your calm, your breath, your softness woven together with centuries of gentle wisdom. When you placed the scroll back onto the table, the room felt different. Not emptier, fuller, as though something had shifted in the space between the walls, making more room for quiet. The dust drifted lazily once more, but now each speck looked like a tiny drifting ember, glowing with the memory of what you'd just lived. The keeper rested a hand lightly on your shoulder. It was the first time they'd touched you. Their palm was warm and steady, grounding you without words, without pressure, just a reminder that you weren't returning from this moment alone, that something had moved with you, softened with you, opened quietly within you. As they guided you back toward the doorway, the lantern seemed to brighten on its own, its light gentle, not urging you forward, simply illuminating the path so you could leave without disturbing the calm that had settled inside you. You paused before stepping out. The room breathed once more, a slow inhale, a peaceful exhale, and you felt yourself breathe with it, matching its rhythm like an old shared heartbeat. When you crossed through the doorway, the night air felt different against your skin, milder, kinder, like cool water cupped gently between warm hands. The valley welcomed you back with the soft sound of the river, its silver thread glistening as though reflecting not the lantern light, but the calm now glowing quietly within you. The keeper didn't follow. They stayed at the doorway, offering a small, profound nod, not a goodbye, but an acknowledgement, a recognition. You came here carrying weight. You leave carrying quiet. You began the slow walk through the valley, the lantern swinging at your side in a soothing rhythm that echoed your footsteps. Nothing rushed you, nothing urged you on. The path allowed you to take your time, trusting that your calm would follow you into the night, into the world beyond, into whatever dreams awaited. And as the ancient chamber faded behind you, one gentle truth settled deeper into your bones. The scroll may stay in its room, but its quiet goes with you. Wherever you rest, wherever you breathe, wherever your thoughts soften enough to let calm whisper its way in again, your journey isn't ending, it's simply becoming quieter. Sleep well, gentle traveler. You carry the ancient quiet now,